Hello and welcome to the show. Now, reverse layouts of circuits are nothing massively new to racing games, although these days it tends to only be the fictional tracks that get them, places like Rio or the Dubai circuits on Forza 7. The real-world circuits, not so much. In all honesty, well, it doesn't really happen in real life. It's very rare you see cars travelling the wrong way around Brands Hatch, for example. Now, there are exceptions. Knock Hill, for example, they'll run track days the wrong way around. I think even a touring car, right? I don't know if it's BTCC or a different sort of touring car series might be racing there in the wrong direction. And there may be the odd track day here and there at different circuits that will travel in the opposite direction, but it's not particularly common. I think a couple of reasons. First of all, sort of safety features, you know, marshal points, the Armco barriers, and where the runoff areas are designed for the cars going in one direction. So you're not so likely to want to tackle it the other way around. And also, the corners themselves are designed in, a particular manner. You will tend to have widening radius corners, which means the tightest point of them is fairly early on, and it gradually gets wider on the exit. Bit easier to drive and easier to overtake on. While there are, of course, again, some exceptions, that tends to be the way tracks are formed. But what happens when you take these real-world circuits and go racing around them in the wrong direction? Because we don't have to worry about safety concerns on Forza, we set off to find out. Now, we have done this before on Forza 6. We ran Spa and Laguna Seca, of course. They have very, very spectacular corners. A Rouge and the corkscrew going in the wrong directions are big deals. But what about circuits that have slightly less crazy characteristics? Somewhere like Mugello, for example. Now, what becomes turn 1 here is a rather interesting corner. It gets quite busy, although in some ways isn't as terrible as it could be, because it is a very wide corner. It's a very long, very, very wide corner through there. There was a lot of cars trying to get 2 and 3, and in some places 4 wide. There's a little bit of a scapping onto the grass. On the most part, though, vehicles would make it through. The chicane is a complete change over what you are used to driving. It's normally flat out because when you come around a fairly slow corner beforehand, but now you're travelling at quite some speed, and trying to judge where you're braking, where you're turning is not the easiest thing to do immediately. This next corner here just about had everybody run wide at some point during the race. It happened to be my turn on the opening lap, trying to find a way past an Alfa Romeo, not making that one stick, pushed it too much, and would end up dropping back behind the big Audi. Now, down through this section, of course, is now a downhill corner rather than an uphill turn. The other thing you've got to bear in mind as well, of course, running the circuit in the opposite direction, is some corners that were previously quite straightforward are now utterly blind. The climb up over this crest, for example, is not the easiest thing to see, especially when you're racing wheel to wheel with other cars. I'm still busy fighting my way against the Audi. Would eventually get the pass completed around the outside through one of the chicanes. I do have to say, the Forza replay cameras do a half-decent job as well at keeping up with the cars as we're driving around the set. There's a couple of places where they go a little bit funky, but on the whole, actually, it's a really good job keeping up with what on earth is going on. Of course, one of the features, if you like, of Mugello, a pretty damn long start-finish straight, and if your car is struggling a little bit with the straight line speed, you can be quite the sitting duck down towards the new turn 1. Isn't necessarily as easy an overtaking opportunity as the old turn 1. It's kind of a very fast run into the corner. Again, this is the whole tightening radius aspect of the majority of the corners. It's quite a fast run into turn 1, but you've just got to keep shrugging off speed as you go through the corner. The Corvette would lose a position to both the Falcon and the HSV, although would get a pass done on the MX-5. The MX-5 in trouble, actually, across the chicane. The Chevy, having a look, trying to get up the inside, has got plenty of corner speed, although finding it a little bit difficult to make the most of it, as the 2 cars up ahead are now busy going side by side. They eventually sort themselves out before the next corner. There are a lot of different lines being experimented with around here. A lot of different lines trying to find speed as the HSVs to go out and find the grass. While the lead 2 were busy running away from the pack, this was the fight for third. Might have seen my Corvette slither off the track in the background. The Porsche was starting to hold cars up. The BMW, the Alfa Romeo, the Audi, my Corvette and a group of cars behind were catching up to this, because the Porsche was not particularly easy to get through these corners, but was defending quite well. And then we came to the straights, in which it was massively, massively fast. These are all A-class cars, and certainly the BMW and Alfa Romeo, for example, weren't the slowest cars down these straights here. And the Porsche is long, long gone before they got to the, well, new turn 1. It wasn't long before this group started getting really, really quite crowded. Now, of course, this is what we want to see. When it comes to racing, you want to have plenty of close action. I was still buzzing around the back of the Audi, unable to really quite find a way past. This time it was the Alfa Romeo's turn with a wheel out across the grass. As I say, it's only in the practice race we did before this, I'm pretty sure everybody at least once went off with that. For whatever reason, it shouldn't be the most difficult corner on this circuit, but you think you've got the car turned in, you think you've got it sorted, and all of a sudden you run out of grip and you're off across the grass. It's very difficult for me to explain that one, but yeah, if you drive the circuit this direction, I can almost guarantee you will end up exploring around there. The Audi got in a little bit of bother. Too many cars trying to fit into too smaller a space. I had a massive, massive run coming up over a crest and managed to slot my way past this group as the Audi falls into the clutches of the HSV, that managing to sweep around the outside. Still the Alfa Romeo is in this group. The BMW's hounding the Porsche but can't do anything, and we know we're coming back onto this start-finish straight. My Corvette's up the inside. The Audi's back up the inside of the HSV as well. The Porsche is out very, very wide. There's a white car, I'm not even sure what it was further back. I think that's a Commodore with a Corvette now coming to join in this huge group as the big drag race commences. The Porsche soaring back off towards the front, the BMW having to fall back into line. Just a large train of cars heading down towards the new turn 1. At the front, it wasn't all plain sailing for the Viper. It had led through the early stages of the race. It was actually starting to come under pressure from a classic Maserati Grand Prix car. Not bad getting one of these working so well in A-Class, because this was just a general open A-Class grid, if you like, and the Viper is a damn good A-Class car, and yeah, it was getting hounded a little bit by the Maserati. The classic F1 car, very, very fast down that main straight and just about any acceleration zone, but as you can imagine, quite a handful through the corners. They try and go too wide through the chicanes. There's a little bit of a bump between the pair of them. We're all still fighting further back. The Maserati's looking around the outside of the Viper. An ambitious move and not quite going to work there, but if it can stay close enough. Again, if you can keep making the Viper have to take defensive lines, keep slowing the Viper down through the bits of the track that it would normally be quick through, the Maserati just had to be close enough when it came to the straight. Unfortunately, again, another small tap between the pair of them, a big slide for the Viper. They both kind of get away with that. They both get going once more with no real harm done, although it's the Maserati running out of grip that would put pay to his chances in this one. Again, another place easy to make a little bit of a mistake. Further back, it continued to be, well, pretty damn manic, while a small bump between kind of the big battle for third would drop a couple of cars a little bit further down the mix. It would kind of drop them into a second group that was forming behind. Basically, everybody outside of the top two were in pretty much one long train. This BMW very much stuck in the middle of it, an RX-7 in with this lot. The HSV, I think, pretty much came off worse of a lot of the cars, all again tearing down towards the new turn 1. They're 2 and 3 wide into this first corner, although it quickly tightens up and the BMW thinks better of that. The Commodore trying desperately to fend off against that Corvette. The Chevy with a good drive on the exit. The BMW with more acceleration than all of them, but 3 wide again into the chicane. It's a little bit on the scary side. The Corvette gets the pass done. The BMW in the end having to yield in all of that. The Corvette's wide on the exit across the grass. There's a Ferrari now trying to go around the outside. The Ferrari would make that one just about work. The RX-7 is now clear of that group as well. There was, I think it was a Ferrari actually, they got a little bit tangled further back. It's, yeah, there were the odd little bump, and that's largely down to just inexperience with this layout, trying to figure out where new braking points are, trying to figure out where new turning points are, and all of that kind of thing, as the BMW would outdrag the Ferrari into the next section. Yeah, it was quite manic when you had about 8 cars running very close together on a circuit layout that nobody is particularly familiar with, and a lot of the corners are blind. Yeah, there were a couple of bumps and a few cars did lose a bit of time. At the front, the Maserati just couldn't quite recover from his sandcastle building expedition. It would be the Viper that would go on to take victory, and these two were miles clear of the rest of us. Truth be told, there were a few of us lap time-wise who could probably keep with them. However, we'd been stuck so long in the big battle behind the Porsche that we just didn't. We ran out of time to do anything about trying to catch them. And when we're setting very similar lap times, trying to make up that size gap is just, yeah, not going to happen. Eventually, the Audi and my Corvette would break free of this group. It was the BMW that was now desperately trying to cling on to 5th place. The Alfa Romeo looking for a way back past. The Porsche continuing to be a bit difficult through the corners, but knew it had a very long straight coming. It just had to get close enough. And the more these two cars fight, the better it is for the Porsche. You know, you're going side by side through a corner. You're going to be slowing each other down. You're going to be taking away the preferred racing line. The Alfa Romeo is up the inside, but you only get the inside for one part of these chicanes. They're not the easiest corners to get passes complete. You'll be on the inside for one there, you're on the outside for the other, and it tends to even itself out. Eventually, the Alfa does get to the inside of the final turn, runs wide on the exit. BMW's trying to get underneath it, can't quite do it. He's going to have to settle for following the Alfa down the straight, but here comes that Porsche. All of the straight line speed of the Porsche down towards the finish line. The BMW moves out of line but can't do anything, and the Porsche, yeah, it's very close indeed to the Alfa. Very, very close indeed. So much we had to go for a photo finish, and it would, amazingly, go to the Porsche. The two orange cars fought so much through the closing stages of that lap that they put the 928 within range. That as soon as they got on the straights, that sheer power of the Porsche was enough. I mean, if the finish line had been a little bit further back, then the Alfa Romeo might have taken it. It probably only have to be sort of 20 metres further down the road. The Alfa Romeo might have taken it, but yeah, the speed of the Porsche down there was pretty incredible. Mugello had been a lot of fun, actually, to race in reverse, and while there were a couple of corners that tended to see cars go exploring a little bit, yeah, overall it hadn't actually been as terrifyingly difficult as you might have expected. We move on next, though, to Suzuka. Again, no crazy corners like the corkscrew, like Eau Rouge and so on, around here to be traversing in reverse. However, this was a lot more difficult than Mugello. Turn 1 now becomes quite a nasty chicane. It's where you brake for all this. While from a standing start it's not too bad because everybody's going fairly slowly. Yeah, where you try and brake for that corner is a rather interesting one. 130R is also pretty damn terrifying, because there is now no runoff area. There is no margin for error through a very fast corner, through a very blind corner. There is a tiny slither of grass and then an Armco barrier. So you can't afford to make any mistakes in an incredibly fast section of the circuit as we all break up towards Spoon for the first time. My Corvette would lead the way from an Alfa Romeo. Mercedes trying to fend off from a Nissan and ASX involved in there. Viper, the Ferrari and so on, as there's plenty of cars trying to go too wide on their way through Spoon, eventually kind of sorting themselves out as they run down towards the hairpin for the first time. One car that was making its way up through the field, BMW M6. Now the S's were perhaps not too bad. Of all the corners around this reverse layout of Suzuka, the S's weren't too terrible to negotiate. Very easy again to make mistakes carrying speed in places where you don't normally carry speed, and the BMW would be able to sweep around the outside of the Viper. That's probably where the replay cameras get the little bit derpiest to that section. And you will notice occasionally sort of bits of scenery will pop in and out as it does. The game doesn't expect you to be doing what we are doing with the cars, but yeah, the S's weren't too bad. I really liked the way what would normally be turn 1 drives. It's a weird corner because you kind of slow on the way in, but you get very, very quick on the exit of that corner, all completely blind, but I think a really interesting way of doing things. Now up to full racing speed, if you like. The new turn 1 was terrifying. It really was a very difficult corner to get right because you could carry so much speed through the first part, but then you had to try and slow it down for the chicane, and sure enough, Corvette was off, NSX was off, Ferrari was off as well. Yeah, the actual corner itself you could probably take fairly close to flat, but then you'd never have time to brake in a straight line into the chicane, so you kind of have to be slow through the left-hander to make sure that you have got time to then slow the car down into the chicane. Really easy to make a silly mistake. Really, really easy to make a silly mistake into that corner. There was, however, one turn that was even more dangerous than that. So, as we leave Spoon, you then go on to the kind of not straight back straight down here. It is flat out. However, there is a blind left-hander coming up that the Ferrari is trying to go around the outside of the Alfa Romeo at. That turn is not normally one you ever think about. Whatever car you're driving, you'll normally be flat out through there. But here, because the speed you are travelling in the normal circuit, you just come out of the hairpin. So you're accelerating away from the hairpin. Whereas in the reverse layout that we're driving, you're going very quickly into that turn, and it isn't flat in these cars. And these A-Class cars are pretty good handling vehicles. You're certainly not going to be going flat through there, but it is still, you know, it's only a small dab on the brakes. Very easy to have massive accidents. And in this race as well, there was a big shunt on the opening lap. That's why the field is a little bit more spread out here, because too much speed through that section, you hit a tyre bundle on the outside and get pinged into the traffic, which is not good at all. That's a massively dangerous corner. We were starting to get the hang of this way of driving Suzuka. 130R continued to be on the scary list of corners. It was a place where you could make up a lot of time if you got things right, but a place that you could lose an awful lot of time if you didn't. The braver you were, I mean, you'll see here, the Ford carries a lot more speed through 130R. The Mercedes, you know, was neat and tidy enough through there, but a little bit too much on the brakes. Loses a position to the Ford and would lose a position to the Nissan as well as they break into Spoon. Yeah, a little bit too slow through that corner. Of course, it affects your run all the way down to Spoon. You could lose, or in that case, 2 places for the Mercedes. That's a sizable loss. At the front, I was struggling with 130R, being a little bit too cautious, and I had made a small bit of a train. 4 cars were vying for the lead. The BMW had caught up to us. That would sweep around the outside of the Ferrari at the terrifying left-hander and move up into third. I was having to defend from the Alfa Romeo as we head around the hairpin. And RX-7 was actually starting to catch us, as well as the group behind started to form up and fight. The BMW's having a look up the inside, not quite able to get close enough. The 2 Degners as well here are now quite different sort of corners being taken in reverse. Again, you're just learning all sorts of different braking zones. Unfortunately for the BMW, he would ask too much of his car trying to go around the outside of the Alfa Romeo, and that would be a trip across the sand trap for him, although again would get it going, only losing 1 position in that particular process. That was probably one of the more common mistakes around here. You've just asked that smidge too much of the car because you're not quite sure what you can do through some of these corners. So yeah, not too unusual to see cars understeering slightly off of the circuit. The Viper that had won at Mugello was struggling a little bit more for pace around this Suzuka layout, was coming under fire from the HSV behind that. The Falcon fighting with a BMW. The Nissan getting involved, the Mercedes at the back of that group. The HSV is up the inside into the final corner, although would he be able to get enough drive out of the other side? As I said, I really like this new final corner. It's a really interesting run trying to get on to the start-finish. If you get things right, it's an incredible corner. It's easy to get them wrong, but it's incredibly rewarding when you get things right. The Viper, a little bit more straight line speed than the HSV down there, and a bit better exit as well onto that straight, able to pull away. HSV, though, closes up. The Nissan is actually closing up. The Falcons around the outside of the BMW and would move up a position towards 130R. The Viper goes defensive. The HSV tries to carry a bit too much speed, can't quite get away with it, and in the fence. Much as I said at the start, there is no runoff area there. You push it too hard, there is a slither of grass, and then you clonk the wall. Now, not massively damaging to the HSV, but it's going to cost him a position, and it's going to cost him a chance of finding a way past that Viper. It's a very, very difficult corner. I don't think there's necessarily a huge amount of difference in the speed. You might be a little bit slower travelling. I think, well, you are a bit slower travelling the direction that we are here, but it's still kind of very nearly being a flat-out corner if you get everything right. This front group, well, we were continuing to fight for the lead. The Alfa Romeo getting into trouble, heading out of Spoon once more. Probably a wheel on the grass and a big slide for that car. The Ferrari would get the pass done around the outside. This time can sweep into position before the hairpin, although a little bit late on the brakes into the hairpin. The 360 goes skewing wide in the braking zone, just about managing to recover. But when everybody's as close as that, that's going to be 2 positions lost for the Ferrari, and things get a little bit worse through the next quarter. Again, trying to fend off on this final lap from the RX-7, just runs wide at the first of the degrees, or the first of the degrees that we are taking here, and that would be the Mazda through as well. An unfortunate final lap for the Ferrari that had been running very, very well indeed. So, at the front, it was now down to 3 heading through the S's for the final time. My Corvette continuing to lead the way, but a very fast BMW going around the outside of that Alfa Romeo. The Alfa had been kind of sat behind me for a little while, just unable to make any passes stick. I knew how quick the BMW was going to be when it came to the start-finish straight, and it certainly didn't help that I was a little bit out of shape. You see my car kicking up the dust a little bit sideways for the Corvette. I knew I needed to get as good a run as possible out of this final corner and just hope that I was far enough away that the BMW wouldn't be able to do anything about me. The RX-7 actually catching up to the car behind, and it would thankfully be my Corvette that would hold on to take victory. The Alfa Romeo would just see off the Mazda behind, the Ferrari ending up in 5th. Yeah, Suzuka, an interesting one. Suzuka, a very interesting one, driving in reverse. You might not necessarily think about it. It was certainly some of the corners that you wouldn't normally think about being even a corner, being even a challenge, that suddenly threw up massive difficulties. Yeah, there was no crazy elevation changes to deal with that were suddenly going in the opposite direction than we were used to. There was small elevation change, but nothing as ludicrous as the corkscrew or whatnot. But just driving these normal circuits in a different direction can, yeah, really throw up some very different challenges. Mugello was actually not too terribly difficult driving that in reverse and made for a very good race. Chaotic race in places, but a very good race. Suzuka was really difficult in a lot of different places, and a lot of places that you wouldn't necessarily expect. 130R, sure, you'd expect that to be tough perhaps going in reverse, but honestly, the first corner, or what would now be the first corner in reverse, was one of the toughest, and that kink, the very, very fast left, completely blind corner down towards the hairpin. Those two were really quite something. I highly recommend you give it a go. It's quite a good possibility that you won't have necessarily even thought about running some of these circuits in reverse. And while sure, it's still the same layout, it's still the same bits of tarmac, it is amazing how much difference, these different approaches, the sort of different speeds and the different angles you're now having to deal with will make to the circuits. There'll probably be some offs, there'll probably be some crashes, but it is, really quite good fun. That, though, is going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.